The joke didn't land until the taillights disappeared. A minute earlier, I was laughing the way you laugh with someone you trust. Loose, easy, unguarded. Ryan cupped my chin, kissed me quick, and said, "Racy to the car." Brad and Luke were already jingling the rental keys like overgrown boys who still believe a prank is a personality. We were in Pienza, a Tuscan hill town that rolls downward in honey-thick streets and opens into a piazza that seems built for postcards. Late sun rinsed the stone. A waiter carried a silver tray like a moon. A church bell took its time stepping through the hour. I ran. They ran. I slowed at the corner where Via dell'Amore tilts into the square, because the cobblestones were slick from a morning drizzle, and because I knew the car was parked 3 turns down, and because the man I married loved to tease more than he loved to sprint. I expected to see them idling near the curb, windows down. Ryan's grin waiting for me to catch up so he could call me Spay, Edster, with the half-mockery we both knew meant affection. Instead, a hatchback shot past the fountain, 3 heads inside, 3 hands waving, 3 mouths shouting, "Catch up!" I waved them back, palms up, that universal sign for quit it. They didn't quit. The car took the next corner hard, tires whispering, boys in their 30s playing at being 19. The taillights shrank and then were gone, red commas erased by stone. The laugh in my mouth turned into the taste of metal. I stood at the lip of the piazza with my phone at 8%, a wallet with 50 euros, and my passport, because it's safer there, in Ryan's backpack. It is safer until the person goes. I called him. Once. Twice. 6 times. Brad sent a crying, laughing emoji and, "Come on, Ava, it's just a bit." Luke texted, "We'll swing back." 10 minutes. Then another 10. I moved toward the shade of an arch where the air smelled like orange peel and coffee and the faint soap of laundry drying behind green shutters. A woman, leaning from a window, called down, "Sei persa? Are you lost?" "Un po'," I answered. "A little." She pointed with her chin toward a blue hand-painted sign under the arch. "Camere Signora Bianca. Rooms." I went because the ground beneath my feet needed to stop sliding, and a doorway with light in it is sometimes a kind of land. The lobby had a bowl of mandarins by the bell, and a counter polished by years of elbows. The woman behind it looked 60 and sturdy, with the kind of gaze that takes your measure without undressing your pride. "Documenti?" she asked in Italian, then switched to English as soon as my grammar stumbled. "My husband has my passport," I said. "He'll bring it back." "When?" she asked. "Soon," I said, and heard how foolish the word can sound when it has to feed you. She made tea the way people make decisions, boiling, certain, placed in front of me without ceremony. Men who make scherzi, pranks, forget that jokes without permission are insults, she said. "You want a room? I have 50 euros. "Then you want a plan," she said, and slid a registration card toward me with a pen that worked. I paid for one night and asked if I could charge my phone. While the battery revived one grudging bar at a time, I wrote Ryan a message that was neither a plea nor a threat. Return with my passport by midnight. If not, I file a report at Stazione di Montepulciano at 9 o'clock. 2 blue checks appeared, the digital blink of acknowledgement. No reply. I set 3 alarms, 2 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock, because fear keeps its own appointments. I lay on the quilt and listen to a scooter cough and move on, to cutlery chime in a trattoria, to a couple in the next room whisper the way people whisper when a day has scraped them thin but not broken them. I tried to imagine what kind of man you had to be to drive away with your wife's passport and call it a laugh. My imagination refused. At 1:43, a car passed and didn't stop. At 2:11, I wrote a note to myself on hotel stationery. Don't call Dad. You are not a child. Get a plan, not permission. At 4:06, I woke from a dream in which a policeman held out my passport like a plate of bread and said, "Eat." By 7:12, my hands had stopped shaking. By 7:20, I could meet my own eyes in the mirror. Downstairs, the lobby smelled like coffee and lemon. Signora Bianca poured me a cup that could have resurrected the unwilling. "Go to the station," she said, "but bring receipts." "I don't have any," I said. She opened a drawer and produced a brown paper bag and a roll of tape. "We make," she said, and together we turned the bag into a folder. Inside we placed screenshots of the chat with Brad's emoji, my text to Ryan with the midnight deadline, the villa booking with his name on it, the note I wrote at 2:11 because sometimes the state doesn't need it, but the soul does. She wrote the station's address on the bag in a clean hand, Stazione di Montepulciano. Also, she added, "You wear your hair like a woman who is prepared." She pantomimed, "A braid." I went to the small lobby bathroom and braided my hair the way she had suggested. And when I looked up, I looked like a woman who had given herself a job title. The bus up the hill came at 8:31, coughing diesel and patience. I bought a ticket and sat by the window where I could practice sentences. My husband took my passport. He left on purpose. I need the document returned. Outside, Tuscany behaved like a painting. Cypresses in procession. Fields combed smooth. A cyclist in a red jersey taking a hill as if it owed him money. Inside, my phone buzzed with a single message from Ryan. "We'll bring it in the morning. Chill." Morning had arrived. I typed, "By 9. After that, report." The typing bubble appeared, hesitated, vanished. The bus climbed. The station smelled like metal and coffee and the kind of time that has agreed to be counted. A young officer with winter pale knuckles and careful English listened as I slid my paper bag folder across the desk and offered my rehearsed word, DS. He read, nodded once, and dialed the villa. "No answer," he said. "We continue to try." He opened a case file and printed my sentences into a shape the state could hold. "Do you have a place to stay?" he asked. "Yes." "Friends?" I hesitated, then thought of the woman who had made me a folder and a plan. "One," I said. "Then you are not alone," he replied, which is a line no police academy teaches but every citizen wants to hear. Outside the square around the station had a cafe where the croissants looked like they had napped in butter. I bought one and ate it standing up because there wasn't room inside me to sit. A woman about my age with auburn hair and hands that looked like they could pick up either a baby or a box without complaint glanced at my braid and my folder and said, in English that had lived in London once, "You need work or just a sandwich?" "Maybe both." "I'm Julia," she said. "If you can sort olives without crying, we pay cash." We rode the bus back together. Shh. He talked like a person who believed that dignity is mostly logistics, hours, tasks, euros you can count. She led me through a side door into a back room that smelled like brine and wood, and a kind of clean that didn't come from chemicals. "This is Marco," she said, and a man in his 40s with forearms like the truth nodded and set a crate in front of me. "You sort," he said. "Good from not good. Clean hands. Time matters." My phone buzzed on the table next to the crate. The officer again. "We will call the villa at 1410. I typed, "Thank you." I washed my hands until they squeaked, dried them on linen that left tiny stings, and began to learn with my fingertips the difference between fruit that would become oil and fruit that would become a lesson. At 14:13, Ryan from Brad's number. We'll bring it in the morning. Chill. The same words, more arrogance in their echo. I typed back. By 9. After that, report. Then I put the phone face down, like you set down a boundary, and kept sorting. By sunset, my shoulders ached, and there was a small, secret pride living in the ache. Julia pressed 30 euros into my palm. For today, she said. Fair work, fair pay. Come back tomorrow if your life still needs a hinge. Thank you, I said, and meant it more than I have ever meant please. Back at Bianca's, I paid for another night with the day's wages and wrote a new line for my folder. Income 1. Olives. I set one alarm for morning and watched it settle without multiplying. The sky over the valley bruised and then forgave. In 48 hours, the carabinieri would knock on the door of the villa and ask a question that did not sound like a joke. But tonight, the only question was simple. Will you keep choosing yourself? I set the answer on the bedside table next to the lamp, next to the folder, next to the braid I would remake in the morning. The morning had the taste of lemon and purpose. Bianca set a cup of coffee in front of me and pointed at the brown paper folder we'd made last night. Receipts, she said, tapping it the way a conductor taps a music stand. Not rage. Rage burns calories you need for stairs. I have stairs today? I asked. You have a hill town, she replied, and a station at the bottom of it. We revised the folder as if it were a resume for my dignity. I added timestamps to each screenshot. 1942, Ryan, race you to the car. 1957, Brad, emoji. 2013, my deadline message. Bianca wrote the current date in neat block letters along the top edge and slid a cheap pen into the crease like a spine. You always bring a pen to the state, she said. The state can never find one. I braided my hair again, tighter this time. The braid like a rope I could hold if the day moved under me. In the mirror, the woman looking back had slept. Only a handful of hours, but enough to move the trembling out of her hands and into the air where it could dissipate. I tucked the braid behind my ear, tucked the folder under my arm, and tucked the word boundary into the front pocket of my mind. It was heavy enough to sit there and not slide around. The bus coughed up the hill at 8:31 like a smoker determined to live. I boarded with 2 euros and 40 cents in coins and felt unreasonably proud of remembering the exact fare. A priest in a black coat counted rosary beads without looking at them. 2 teenage boys in matching jackets argued about whether you could taste the difference between gelato and ice cream in December. A woman with a stroller fell asleep so instantly it looked like a magic trick. The driver took each curve as if he were on familiar terms with gravity. I sat by the window and watched Tuscany do that smug thing where it pretends to be a painting. Olive groves stippled like green thoughts. A row of cypresses that couldn't stand to be anywhere but in line. A farmhouse the color of toasted bread. The bus round did a bend, and the valley opened wide, and I caught my own reflection in the glass, superimposed over the fields. I looked like someone who had borrowed competence from a future version of herself. At 8:57, my phone buzzed. A new message from Brad's number. We were hammered, Ava. Chill. We'll swing by late morning. The words looked like they had all overslept and were asking me to understand. I typed 0900 at Stazione di Montepulciano. After that, I file. The blue check marks blinked once, then nothing. The station didn't have a grand facade. It had a clock that agreed with itself and a ticket window where a woman with lipstick the color of foregone conclusions sold me a bottle of water and pointed out the public fountain. "Italy is many things, signora," she said. "Thirsty is not one of them." Inside, the Carabinieri office smelled like paper and radiator heat, and the kind of floor polish that believes in itself. The young officer from yesterday, he couldn't have been older than 30, looked up when I stepped in and raised his eyebrows slightly in that European way that asks, "Well, did the world behave?" I shook my head. "Name?" he asked. I told him. He wrote it in careful capitals. "Husband's name?" He wrote that too. "Date of entry into Italy?" I pulled up the flight confirmation and let him copy it down to the seat number. "Address of accommodation?" I slid the villa booking across the counter. He turned the printed sheet and wrote a phone number with such deliberate strokes you'd think each digit owed him money. "We call now," he said, checking the clock. 9:07. He dialed. The line rang into a place I could imagine perfectly. Big glass doors, a bowl of keys, a receptionist named something like Federica, who could make a fax machine behave by glaring at it. The officer listened, his face neutral, then hung up. "No answer," he said. "We try again at 9:30 and 10. Please sit." I sat on a wooden bench that had decided to be honest about being a wooden bench. Number. Fake cushion. No apology. The radiator hissed contentedly. The priest from the bus came in and nodded to me like we had exchanged a secret, which we had, I supposed. The secret of being human, in rooms where rules live. At 9:19, I sent myself a message. "You are doing this well." I kept it because sometimes you have to be your own witness. At 9:30, the officer dialed again. This time someone answered. He straightened, spoke quickly in Italian, repeated the names, Ryan Carter, Villa della Stella, then said the word passaporto, with the kind of unhaunted emphasis that only comes from saying it every day. He hung up and looked at me. "They say they will contact Signor Carter and call us back," he said. "We wait." He printed out a form titled something I recognized from guidebooks, Dichiarazione. "If we formalize," he added, "we use this." It is boring. Boring is powerful. Boring as rails, I said, thinking of the sticky note I would later put on my kettle. He smiled like we had found the X. Act, same metaphor, on different shelves. At 9:41, my phone lit up with Ryan. "We're in Montalcino. It's an hour away. Don't be dramatic." I typed, 11 o'clock latest. After that, report. His response arrived in pieces over 5 minutes, as if he were arguing with his own conscience in group chat. "Don't be like this." I set the phone face down. The urge to reply with a paragraph rose and then receded. In the quiet that followed, I heard 3 distinct sounds layered into a little civic symphony. A stamp thumping paper somewhere behind the wall. The scrape of a man in the corridor shoveling invisible snow off the soles of his shoes. And the faint hiss of the radiator promising winter that it had nothing to fear. At 10:02, Julia appeared in the doorway as if stations were her hobby. She held a paper cup of coffee and a sandwich wrapped in brown paper. "You forget to eat when you are busy being brave," she said, handing me both. I tried bravery on an empty stomach once. My hands shook. No hard, I almost mailed my earrings to the wrong address. "You didn't have to come," I said, and wished instantly that I hadn't said it because she already had. "I was coming this way anyway," she lied gracefully. "Marco says if you show up at 6 tomorrow, he will pay you for your hands again." I ate in 2 gulps because my jaw wanted a job. The coffee had that thin station taste that still miraculously does what you ask. The officer's phone rang at 10:11. He spoke with more emphasis this time, wrote a time on the margin of my file, 11:30, and underlined it twice. Then he called the villa back. "Si, confermiamo," he said. He hung up and looked at me. "They say they will bring your husband to the station by 11:30. We will see if they enjoy promises." I wrote 11:30 in thick ink inside the folder, and beneath it, "If not, we file." Julia leaned over and read upside down. "You keep time like a carpenter," she said. "Straight cuts." "Bianca told me receipts, not rage," I said. "Bianca once led a complaint against a tour company that wanted her to wash 12 rooms with 4 hours of pay," Julia said. "She mailed them her mop in a box with a copy of the law." "Tell me more Bianca stories," I said, "because that's what you do when you're keeping your nervous system from running ahead without you. You put it on a leash made of other people's competence." So Julia told me about the time Bianca organized the neighborhood against a bar that decided midnight was noon, and how she was not loud, but she was contiguous. She touched every house on the street until the bar owner felt like the whole block was a single person with one complaint written neatly on a single page. We laughed once, quietly, an exhale that made room in the station like moving a chair. The officer glanced up and then down again, a small smile hitting his mouth like a bird that knows the window is glass. At 11:07, Ryan sent an update in the tone of someone narrating a sports injury. 10 minutes away, chill. The word chill had done so much heavy lifting in the past 24 hours that I imagined it writing a resignation letter. "Dear Ryan, I quit. Find another word to do the work of your apologies." At 11:19, the clock ticked in a way I could hear. At 11:27, I stood, because my legs believed standing might move time along. At 11:30, nothing happened, except that the radiator sighed like a tired animal. At 11:32, the officer opened a drawer and pulled out the dichiarazione form. "We file at noon," he said, calm as a church. I breathed out. It felt like unscrewing a jar that had been stuck for years and suddenly yielded. "Okay," I said. "Noon." Julia squeezed my shoulder with a hand that could move crates. "Afternoon we eat," she said, as if the universe had agreed to that order long ago. At 11:41, a different officer, older, with a mustache that had seen things, stepped into the room and spoke to my officer in a string of syllables that sounded like reminding. My officer nodded, picked up the phone again, dialed the villa, and spoke in slower Italian. I heard the word presentarsi, present yourselves, and the phrase alle 11:30, repeated like a line in a song that refuses to get unstuck. He hung up, made a note, and turned to me. "Sometimes," he said, "people think time is flexible if the person waiting is a woman." "I used to think that too," I said. "I don't anymore." At 11:57, I signed the dichiarazione. My name on the line didn't look angry. It looked straight. The officer stamped the top right corner with a firm, unhurried hand. The sound was deeply satisfying. "File number," he said, reading it out. "Please keep." I wrote the file number on the outside of my folder, then again on a little scrap of paper and slid it into my shoe because I had a sudden wild memory of one movie where everything burned and the hero had the code memorized. Courage makes you theatrical if you don't give it tasks. At 12:06, my phone buzzed with Ryan. Parking. At 12:07, Brad. Almost there. At 12:08, Luke sent a thumbs up. Because there is always a Luke. I didn't reply. The file was stamped. Noon had enacted itself. The officer looked at me and I looked at him, and between us the radiator eased, a long hiss that might have been approval. At 12:13, Bianca texted, "Pasta at 13:45. You need carbohydrates to manage consequences." I sent back a heart and a fork emoji, and then, because not every message has to be clever, I added, "Thank you for the mop story." At 12:19, footsteps sounded in the corridor, confident in that way only men who believe the world is a set think to walk. The younger officer stood up without hurry. The older one turned a page with ceremonial care, and Julia shifted her weight from one foot to the other like a boxer settling into stance. At 12:21, the door handle turned. The handle turned and the door opened with that soft, official sigh old doors make when they've outlived 100 arguments. Ryan came in first. Brad followed, all elbows and sunglasses on his head like a trophy. Luke brought up the rear with the guilty look of a man who wants to be Switzerland and keeps discovering he is, in fact, a peninsula. They smelled faintly of wine and the kind of soap you get in hotel bathrooms. Expensive. Anonymous. Ryan scanned the room and landed on me as if he'd been practicing the face he would wear. An injured athlete, about to explain why the rules were unfair to men who were just having a little fun. The young officer stood. "Buongiorno," he said, voice level. "Documents." Ryan's eyebrows did that little hop they do when he thinks charm can stand in for paper. "Hey," he said to me first, like we were alone. "This is... wow. Dramatic." Julia, at my shoulder, didn't move. The older officer in the corner folded his newspaper neatly, half a page at a time, without saying a word. Communicated that this room would proceed on a schedule not set by anyone holding a hangover. "Documents," the officer repeated. He was polite the way bridges are polite. They will carry you if you behave like gravity exists. Brad fished the passport out of a backpack with a flourish he seemed to regret immediately in the face of neutral furniture. Luke produced his ID without being asked, as if hoping compliance could be a talisman. Ryan patted his pockets as if a driver's license were a rabbit that might hop out with enough encouragement. He finally found it in his back pocket and put it on the desk with more force than necessary. The officer didn't flinch. "Signora," the officer said to me, and gestured to the wooden chair opposite his desk. I sat. The stamp sat to his right, square and patient, like a small building waiting to be placed in a city. "First," he said, "we confirm the document is yours." He opened my passport and checked the photo, then my face, then the photo again. It was the first time all morning anyone had looked straight at me without also looking past me to the nearest exit. "Confermiamo," he said, and returned the passport to the exact middle of the desk, neither toward me nor toward Ryan. Then to Ryan. "Please explain how your wife's passport was in your possession while you were not." Ryan went for the shrug. "It was a joke. We were messing around. She runs slow. We thought—" The officer raised one hand the way teachers do when a classroom gets ahead of itself. "We do not joke with documents," he said, "and we do not drive away from people who are legally required to carry them." "It's not like we left her in the desert," Brad said under his breath, just loud enough to be heard, the sentence shedding decency as it walked into the room. The older officer put down his folded paper and lifted a pen as if to sign something invisible. "You will speak only when asked," he said, not loud, not angry. It worked better, too, Han shouting. The younger officer turned to me. "Signora Tran," he said, using my last name correctly on the first try. "Do you wish to file a formal complaint?" I looked at the folder Bianca and I had made out of a paper bag. I looked at the clock. 12:24. I looked at Ryan's face, which had become the face he reserves for customer service employees, earnest, coaxing, slightly bored. I looked back at the officer. "I already did," I said, and tapped the top right corner of the dichiarazione he'd stamped at noon. At 12 o'clock. "Bene," he said, and something in my spine uncrossed. "Then we proceed in that context." He positioned the form between us and read in English, so there would be no generosity lost in translation. "You state that your husband left you in Pienza without money enough for travel, without passport, and without time certain for return. You state you contacted him with a deadline. There was no appearance. This is your signature," I confirmed. He nodded, then looked at Ryan. "Do you dispute the facts of timing?" Ryan spread his hands, an appeal to the ceiling fans. "We were delayed." "What delayed you?" the officer asked. "Wine tasting," Ryan said with the rising intonation of a man taking a quiz he hadn't studied for, but believes he can pass by confidence alone. "Wine is not an emergency," the officer said mildly. "It is the opposite of an emergency." "It is often the cause," Brad huffed. "Come on, man. It's Italy. People relax." The officer took his pen and drew a small square on the edge of the paper. "This square," he said, "is the law." "Look how big it is. It is not very big. Still, we live in it. You may drink wine inside the square. You may even laugh inside the square. You may not remove a person's documents and drive away inside the square. Do you understand?" Luke blessedly nodded. "Yes," he said with the relief of someone who had been wanting instructions. The officer slid my passport gently toward me. "Please hold this," he said. "And sign here that you have received it," I signed. The pen wrote smoothly. My name looked as if it had standing. He turned to Ryan. "Now you will give your statement," he said. "Not long." "Only accurate," Ryan inhaled, a sound like a reset. "We took a joke too far," he said. "I'm sorry." "Right," the officer said, pointing to the blank rectangle under the printed lines. Ryan reached for the pen, hesitated. "What do I write?" he asked. "Exactly what you just said," the officer replied. "And the time you returned the document." He slid the clock across the desk with the kind of theatricality that isn't theater at all. It's clarity. Ryan wrote slowly, as if forming the letters might cost him calories he had been saving for outrage. Brad shifted, his knee bouncing like a kid in church. Luke stared at his shoes as if they had betrayed him by wearing his feet here. While Ryan wrote, the older officer asked me, "Do you need assistance contacting your consulate?" I told him no. The document was in my hand, and my plans were small, specific, and local. "Good," he said. "Small plans rarely fail." Ryan capped the pen, the click loud as a gavel in my ribs. The officer read his statement silently, then stamped it with the square building that was not actually a building, and slid the paper into a file that already had my name on it. "If you wish to pursue charges," he said to me, "the option remains open for 30 days. My advice is, do only what helps you. Some actions feed the story that hurt you. We try to feed only the facts." "I like boring facts," I said. "They will like you back," he said. He stood, which made the whole room stand. "You may go," he told the men, and they started toward the door. "Bradley," he added. How had he learned Brad's full name? "Next time you choose between making a joke and making a call, you will make the call." Brad looked for the first time all day like someone who could grow up. Ryan turned to me as if we were in a hallway at home and not in a room that kept time for us. "Ava," he said, that soft tone he keeps in a pocket for when he needs to return me to our original contract. "Let's not blow this up." "We're in another country," I stood too. The passport sat solid in my hand. It had the dry feel of a thing that has done its job and doesn't need to be thanked. "I'm not blowing anything up," I said. "I'm writing it down." "Tonight," he said. "We'll come back to the villa. No," I said, "you won't." I took a breath. Inside it, my plan unfolded like a paper map that knows where the creases go. "You have 48 hours to collect your things from the apartment. After that, the building manager and a locksmith will help you leave. If you try to enter without notice, the police will meet you there with our file number instead of wine." He blinked once. Brad's knee stopped bouncing. Luke exhaled so quietly, only the radiator heard. 48 seems harsh, Ryan said, as if this were a debate team and he had chosen Nancy as his stance. "It seems accurate," I said. The young officer cleared his throat. "We do not intervene in domestic arrangements," he said, "unless invited by the law. But 30 days is a long time to leave a door open. 48 hours is very reasonable for a door that must close." Ryan looked at the clock as if it might lie for him. The clock refused. "This is crazy," he said weakly. "What is crazy?" the older officer said, picking up his folded newspaper again. "Is thinking time will cooperate with you just because other people always have." Julia stepped half a step closer to me. Not in front, not behind, the side. "Pasta at 13:45, she reminded me, voice light as a path. "Bianca will be angry if we are late." I nodded. "We're leaving now," I said, and turned to the officers. "Grazie," I added, the word carrying the exact weight I wanted it to. "Prego," the young one said, "and Signora, keep that folder. The world behaves better in front of folders, out in the corridor." The light was cooler, the kind that makes you see dust motes as proof that the air is doing its job. Ryan followed 2 steps. "We can talk later," he said, searching my face for the old compromise. "After lunch?" "I already have lunch," I said. "With who?" He made it sound like a betrayal. "People who fed me when you didn't," I said, and walked toward daylight with a passport in my hand and a number in my shoe, and a clock, starting a new count no one else could stop. On the steps outside the station, Julia bumped my shoulder with hers like teammates do. "That line about 48 hours, she said. "You said it like a person who knew her timer before she knew her recipe." "I did," I said, "at 12 o'clock, when the stamp hit the paper." "And now?" she asked. "Now I keep the time," I said. "Every hour earns something." We started up the hill. The bus stop bench had one elderly man on it, feeding crumbs to a sparrow who looked like it had a bank account. The sky had decided to be an honest blue. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, and I let it. Not every sound deserves your eyes. At the top of the stairs that cut an alley into 2 equal parts, I stopped. Not because I needed air, because I needed to choose what to do with it. Ryan's voice tried a last climb from the street below, Ava, but it reached me thinner than before, without scaffolding. Julia watched my face. "You good?" she asked. "I'm accurate," I said, which is different. "Come then," she said. "Bianca makes a sauce that explains boundaries better than any speech." We walked. The town offered its ordinary. A boy in a red sweater tying a shoelace with his tongue stuck out. A woman arguing gently with an orange cat. 2 tourists reading a map upside down with the confidence of empire. A smell of garlic lifting from a kitchen window like advice. In a shop window, my reflection moved with me. Not ahead, not behind. At Bianca's door, I paused and looked down the street one last time. I wasn't expecting to see anyone. I was. Practicing the look you give the past when you've already printed a copy and put it in a folder. It can exist. It just can't edit. Inside, plates clinked. A ladle knocked the side of a pot, and a woman who runs a small empire with a mop and a pen called from the kitchen. "You're late." "By how much?" I asked. 2 minutes, she said. "Good. It means you're learning to use time for yourself." After lunch, I set the first 4 tasks that will make the 48 hours stick, and one of them is a call Ryan will never see coming. Bianca's kitchen smelled like tomatoes that had decided to be useful. She ladled sauce onto pasta as if she were issuing instructions. "Eat," she said, "then write. Food first, forms second. The head works better when the stomach is not auditioning for attention." Julia bumped a basket of bread in my direction. 2 pieces, she said. Bravery burns carbs. I ate like a person paying back a debt to her body. Steam rose, fogged my glasses, cleared. The fork made small clock sounds against the plate. When I finished, Bianca put a second helping on the lip of the bowl and shook her head when I started to protest. "You don't argue with a woman who owns a mop and a pen," she said, which sounded like a proverb. After lunch, we moved to the little lobby table where Bianca keeps a lamp, a stapler that has outlived 3 owners, and a charger for guests who arrive with dead phones and unraveled plans. I opened my laptop and the folder. The brown paper looked almost official now, creased, inked, carrying its new weight. 4 tasks, I said, half to myself, half to the room. If I do these, the 48 hours will stick. "Make them sentences," Bianca said, settling in across from me with a ledger and an attitude. Sentences are easier to obey than moods. Task 1. Notify the building manager and schedule the lock change. I drafted the email in English and Italian, Bianca peering at my phrasing, correcting a verb here, sharpening a noun there. "Dear Signor Rinaldi, per our lease, I am changing the entry locks on Thursday at 1400 hours. Please confirm access for the locksmith and supervision for the pickup window I am setting for my husband's belongings on Friday from 1700 to 1800. Police file number attached for reference. Thank you for acknowledging receipt within the day." "Attach the file number in the subject line," Bianca advised. "People open numerical truth faster than emotional truth." I did. Then I called the locksmith Julia recommended, her cousin's friend, which in Italian, "Ali," is the same as a security clearance. "We can do tomorrow, 1400, a voice promised. "Bring documento and a smile." I booked it and added the appointment to my calendar with a color I don't use for anything else. Task 2. Inventory and photographs. Julia fetched a roll of masking tape from her bag. "Label maker," she said, grinning. "Portable." I made a checklist in my notes app. Bedroom closet, his suits, 2 navy, 1 gray, the one he calls sharkskin. Toiletries, the cologne that smells like cedar and apologies. Desk drawer, external hard drive, cables, notebook. Bookshelf, travel guides he never reads but displays. I practiced the sentences I would text him later. "You will collect your items Friday 1700 to 1800. The building manager will be present. If you need a different time, propose 2 alternatives in writing by Thursday 12 noon. Do not arrive unannounced." "Not angry," Julia said, peeking at the draft message. Accurate. Task 3. Legal and financial pins. I called Avvocato Leone. He answered as if phones were trials and he had already won 3 today. "Signora Tran," he said, "I read your summary." "Excellent. We proceed on rails." "Pins first," I said, "before home drama turns into internet drama." "Yes," he agreed. "Today, remove him as authorized user on any card you control. Change two-factor authentication to a number he cannot see. Update your emergency contact with your bank and airline. Tomorrow, send formal notice of pickup window. Copy me and the building manager. Include the police file number. Friday, supervised retrieval or default. Quietly, precisely, I opened my banking app and sent a message to customer service. Please remove authorized user Ryan Carter ending in 42. Effective immediately. Also, please mail a new card with a new number. I updated two-factor on everything I could think of. Email, cloud drive, the account we used for utilities, my travel profile. Each time a service sent a 6-digit code, I wrote the T. I'm in my notebook, like a tally of small borders drawn with unassuming ink. Leon continued, "Send a simple letter, interim separation of finances. Not because war, because bookkeeping." "I like bookkeeping," I said. "That is why this will be boring and successful," he said. "Also, one more thing he will not expect. Call your airline to split the PNR for your return ticket so you are not seated together by accident. It sounds small. It is, in fact, dignity." I called the airline. A woman with a voice like a well-organized drawer found my reservation, separated it from the joint booking, and assigned me a window seat in a row that had already forgiven people for things. "Done," she said. "You will receive an email in 5 minutes." "Grazie," I said, and meant it nearly as much as I had meant the pasta. Task 4. Communication with Ryan. I drafted the message in notes before I allowed it to become real in messages. Ryan, you will collect your belongings Friday 1700 to 1800, supervised by the building manager. If this time does not work, reply by Thursday 12 noon with 2 alternatives. No entry without supervision. Locksmith will change locks Thursday, 1400 hours. This is not punitive. It is procedural. Police file number 444/22. Please confirm receipt. Julia read over my shoulder and whistled low. "That's a sentence with a backbone," she said. Bianca nodded. "Now remove the extra adjectives." I cut 3 words I had added for satisfaction and kept the ones that would hold in courtrooms, literal or social. Then I sent it. The whoosh sound of a dispatched message felt, for once, like a train leaving on time rather than a cliff edge. Seconds later, the tiny banner "Delivered" appeared. A bubble opened, pulsed, disappeared. Nothing else came. Good. Silence can be professionalism. "Now the call he won't expect," Leona said when I summarized. "Insurance. Travel insurance and the credit card tour concierge. If you booked any part of the villa through a card perk, note that you have filed the police report regarding withheld documents. You're not asking them to do anything. You're just adding the fact to their file. Quiet facts often travel faster than noisy stories. I made the calls. I said only what was necessary. I read file numbers like ingredients. Each time I hung up, I felt another inch of floor appear under my shoes. We took a break so Bianca could refill the lamp's one good bulb and scold a delivery man in a tone that managed to be both maternal and judicial. Julia checked her phone and showed me a photo from the market. A pyramid of oranges we'd stacked that morning, still standing, light pooling in their pores like a quiet applause. "Look," she said, "your hands made a thing stay." "Tell me what I'm missing," I asked them. What always surprises people because they think it's too small to matter, and then it mattered. "Mail," Bianca said at once. "Redirect your mail." "Not forever, for a month. Things that pretend to be emergencies travel by post. Better they land where the concierge knows your name." "Keys," Julia added. "Every key you own that is not a door. Locker keys, bike keys, car keys at the garage. Change where they live. People forget that access isn't just a lock. It's a habit." I wrote, "Mail, temporary redirect. Keys, move." The list started to look like scaffolding. I added one more line without asking permission from anyone. Save copies of every message thread to PDF. Because memory is a negotiator, paper is a witness. By late afternoon, the emails were sent, the replies filed in a folder named After, the appointments in my calendar like small lighthouses. I called the building manager, who spoke English with the weary grace of a man who has translated 1,000 tenant dramas into the grammar of delivery windows. He confirmed the time for the locksmith and promised to be present for the pickup. "We prefer no shouting," he said. "Shouting makes the elevator stop." "Agreed," I said. "This will be precise." "Precise is my favorite," he replied, and hung up, sounding almost cheerful. We walked to the market for the last hour of the day. The square had that late light that turns everything forgiving. I stacked apples and practiced handing change like a person who trusts her own palm. My body, shoulders, wrists, the small muscles along the spine that love a list, felt used in the way a day hopes to be used. "Tomorrow," Julia said, closing the cash drawer with a solid thump, "we'll see if your sentences worked." "They already worked," I said. "They turned noise into nouns." That night, in Bianca's spare room, I laid the folder on the nightstand like you set down a sleeping infant, careful, certain it would still be there. I set a single alarm for 7 o'clock and then, as an act of faith, turned my phone face down. The room smelled faintly of lemon and old stone. A breeze came in and touched the curtain, a small wrist of air. Somewhere below in the courtyard, a neighbor watered a plant and talked to it the way people talk to pets or stubborn ideas. I slept. I dreamed, not of Ryan, and not of officers, and not of clocks, but of the market in the early morning, Julia's hands moving, and mine moving too, oranges shining like proof. Morning arrived like a hand that meant to help. Bianca slid a basket of rolls onto the counter and pointed at my folder as if it had asked to be made stronger. "Today you do 3 things," she said. 1, you keep your appointments. 2, you let other people keep theirs. 3, you don't apologize to clocks. Julia laughed. "She means don't say sorry to the locksmith when the time is exactly the time." I checked my list. The subject lines in my inbox looked like a row of small green lights. Lock change, 1400, confirmed. Rinaldi Building Management. Your itinerary has been updated. PNR split. Air Europa. Authorized user removal complete. Card services. Temporary mail hold / redirect. Confirmed. ID ML3198, Postal Service. Thursday, 1700 to 1800 pickup window. Calendar invite. Manager, me, witness. I opened the calendar. The pickup slot tomorrow would be overseen by the building manager and witnessed by a neighbor, Rena, who taught ceramics and believed in glazing arguments, until they were waterproof. I had sent her a brief note last night. She replied with an emoji I'd never seen. 2 hands holding a bowl, and 1 sentence. I will be there with my clipboard and my most lawful sweater. Julia and I walked to the market for the early shift. The square was still. A cat washed its face on a windowsill, paw moving with the unapologetic concentration of a monk. In the stall's back room, Marco set down a crate and looked at my braid, which was tighter than yesterday. You look like someone who knows where her wallet is, he said, which in his language meant, you have decided who you are for the next 4 hours. We stalked, weighed, wrapped, and did not waste sentences. The early customers were people who buy lettuce like they are exchanging secrets. A man in a tweed cap chose 6 pairs as if assembling a choir. A girl with a long braid like mine asked in a whisper if she could hold the scale hook, just for a second. I let her, and watched the way competence touch. He's even the very young, like a benediction. At 11:30 I wiped my hands, stepped into the alley, and called the building manager. He answered on the second ring, voice like late afternoon. We are on schedule for 14, he said. Your locksmith is old school. He brought a toolbox that could birth a smaller world. Please have him send the invoice to my email, I said, and I'll be on video. We prefer quiet lobbies, he said. So we will be quiet. He paused, added, I have your police file number in the folder. It is comforting. Folders can be blankets, I said. Julia leaned in the doorway, watching me. You talk like we stack, she teased. Bottom layer facts, top layer oranges. Top layer, a jar for the tips, Marco called from inside. People are generous when your piles don't wobble. At 13:42, Bianca's message arrived. Pasta. You eat like someone has a locksmith appointment, she said when I walked in, already ladling sauce. I do, I said. At 14, where my body is. Not, bodies are cooperative, she said. Phones make them extend. I ate, wiped my mouth, washed my hands like a ritual, and propped my phone against the sugar jar. At exactly 1400 in my apartment's time zone, the building manager connected. The video juddered, then steadied. My front door, the scuffed brass 3B, the peephole I never used because surprises aren't improved by peeking. The locksmith came into frame, a man with a careful jaw and a shirt embroidered with a company name that had the word Guardian in it. He waved at the camera like an uncle at a recital. Senora Tran, the manager said, we begin. The locksmith produced a mat, kneeled, and set the mat beneath the lock as if the door were an altar he refused to scratch. He took out a cylinder, a set of tiny screws, a tool that looked like a hook and another that looked like a small silver fish. The sound was soft intimacy, metal conversing with metal, a click that did not demand anyone's attention and got mine completely. Old lock, he said to the manager. Stubborn. He smiled at the camera. We encourage it to retire. He worked for 11 minutes and 32 seconds. I know because I watched the numbers on the screen in the corner. Not because I needed to count, but because I needed to measure a thing becoming true. When the new cylinder slid into place, the click felt like a sentence ending honestly. New keys, he said, holding up 2, then 3, then 4. The manager held them to the camera one by one like a card trick. A, B, C, D. He put them into a labeled envelope. Tran, primary, manager, hold, witness, temp. He set my old keys into another envelope stamped dispose. We keep for 7 days, he said, then shred. Please email the invoice, I said, and take a photo of the new lock for the file. Already in your inbox, the manager said. You have become a person people preempt. When the call ended, I felt not triumphant, but aligned. A thing that had been untrue was now true, and the world had made a small, almost imperceptible sound of relief. I checked messages. 2 bank confirmations. 1 airline email with a boarding pass bearing only my name. A response from the Postal Service redirect. Success. Rena had added a calendar reminder for herself. Wear lawful sweater. And a single text from Ryan. Is this necessary? I typed, it is precise. Friday, 1700 to 1800. Confirm. The dots pulsed, stopped. Then, I'll let you know. I wrote back, by Thursday, 12 o'clock, 2 alternatives if you cannot make the window. Otherwise, the scheduled time stands. Julia read the exchange over my shoulder. He's still trying to invite you into a debate, she said. I brought a calendar, I said. It doesn't argue. At 15:20, the officer from the station texted, We may visit the villa this evening to confirm identities and complete the note on your file. I replied with a thank you and a request. Please do not contact me unless necessary. He wrote back, Understood. You will receive written confirmation only. Will you go? Julia asked. No, I said. I don't attend other people's knocks. We returned to the stall for the late shift. The winter light made everything look hand-painted. A woman bought 3 pomegranates and confessed she didn't know what to do with them. Break them open and pronounce the seeds a miracle, I said, and Julia nodded like I had passed a small tender exam. At closing, Marco counted cash and handed me an envelope. For the day, he said, plus a little because you didn't flinch at the man who wanted to argue about spinach. I have become a person who prefers spinach to debates, I said. Everyone wins, he said. We walked home by the long way, so we could see the valley lay itself out like a book we had already read and still loved. My phone buzzed once, a calendar reminder from Bianca titled, Eat Fruit You Didn't Sell. In my room, I opened an orange so ripe, the peel came off like an agreement. I put the segments in a glass bowl, placed the bee owl on the windowsill, and stood there, eating slowly, segment by segment, as the sky considered violet and then declined. At 18:03, the building manager emailed a photo of the new lock, the invoice, and a note. Keys are in my desk. Your witness confirms tomorrow. He had attached a PDF titled Entry Policy Carter and a single sentence. Shouting stops the elevator. I laughed aloud, alone in the room, not because it was funny, but because it had the timbre of a line you can live by. At 18:21, Rena sent a selfie from my hallway. Navy sweater, clipboard, the lawful energy of someone who brings pens to other people's emergencies. Tomorrow I will be Switzerland with a stopwatch, she wrote. Also, your doormat needed a shake. I shook it sternly. At 19:02, an email arrived from Lyon. Brief note sent to opposing counsel, if/when retained, indicating non-emergency separation of finances. Confirmation below. He had attached 3 letters, each in language so calm it might have been asleep, if it weren't doing its job so beautifully. At 20:12, another message from the officer. We will go to the villa at 2100. You will receive written summary. I closed my laptop, turned my phone face down, and lay on the bed with my hands folded like someone attending to her own pulse. The room hummed with the soft sounds of a building that has decided not to fall down. Outside, in the courtyard, a neighbor laughed once, and then once again in a different key. I felt the shape of fatigue without the heat of panic. The knock at the villa belonged to them, not me. My night belonged to soup and silence. In Bianca's kitchen, the pot was already on. She tasted, adjusted, added a leaf and a pinch the way a good lawyer adds clauses, quiet corrections. We ate at the small table under the lamp. Julia told me about her grandmother who used to write grocery lists like music, lines, rests, crescendos of flour before a holiday. Bianca told us the mop story again, and I laughed in the exact same place, which made me trust myself. After bowls and spoons had done their work, I rinsed them with the care of someone who knows what it costs to be fed. My phone buzzed once more. A photo from the market, taken by a tourist, tagged with a location and a caption I couldn't read because my account was private and language is a gate. The picture showed me handing change to a woman, both of us smiling as if the transaction were a vote. "Look at that," Julia said over my shoulder, squinting. "You look like you own your day." "I rent it," I said, "and I pay on time." I slept without alarms. At 23:11, my phone lit the room once with the officer's summary. I didn't read it until morning. The night earned its shape. I woke before the room did. The light at the edge of the shutter looked like a thin idea deciding whether to be born. My phone, face down on the nightstand, remembered something before I did. When I turned it over, the Carabinieri's overnight email waited like a folded letter on a kitchen table. Subject: Nota. Visita al Villa delle Stelle, 21:03, 21:28. The summary was clean. Officers arrived 21:03, 21:28. Identities confirmed 21:07. Documents checked 21:10. Statement of misunderstanding recorded 21:18. File annotated 21:23. Visit concluded 21:28. No fines, no fireworks, no narrative for anyone to eat. 2 sentences stood out. The complainant's passport is in her possession. The file remains open for 30 days. Boring like bedrock. Bianca tapped the door once with her knuckle. "You slept," she said, as if I had turned in homework. "Coffee, then read." "I read," I said, handing her the phone. She skimmed the summary, nodded once, and set a cup beside my folder. "Good," she said. "PA per did its job. Now you do yours." My calendar had Thursday underlined in the color I'd assigned to consequence. At 12 o'clock, Ryan's window to propose alternative pickup times would close. At 1400, the lock was already changed, yesterday's truth carrying into today like a paid bill. At 1700 tomorrow, the supervised pickup would either happen or fail, and either event would be a sentence I could live inside. Julia arrived with a bag of plums and the look of someone who likes mornings because they're unarguable. "The officer's email?" she asked. "Efficient," I said. "Good," she said. "You'll like the market today. Thursday's the beekeepers." We walked down the hill with my folder under my arm and our scarves doing their small work. The air smelled like wet stone and the beginning of bread. In the square, a woman arranged jars of honey like a family photo, light ones in front, dark ones in the back looking serious. She let us taste. One spoonful had a sunburn to it. Another tasted green-eye in a way that made me think of kneeling in grass to tie a shoe. "You like names," the beekeeper said, after I asked what flowers made what gold. "You like to call things what they are." "I do," I said. "It calms weather." We opened the stall. I tied on an apron that had already forgiven the world for being sticky. Marco set plums beside pears, apples beside the memory of August. "Today you will meet the woman who knows which mushrooms won't lie," he said. "Keep a notebook." At 9:07, my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder titled Separate Utilities. I stepped into the alley behind the stall, where the wall carried the sun like a coat, and called the electricity provider first. "Good morning, separate account effective immediately," the woman said after 3 taps and 1 spelling of my last name. "We will email confirmation." For gas, different number, I called gas. Gas said fine. Water said of course. The internet company put me on hold with Vivaldi, which felt like a prank but was not. "Done," the man said eventually, yawning softly. "You are primary. Others are guests." He didn't mean it like philosophy, but I wrote the sentence down anyway. Back inside, a woman with silver hair and a cardigan the color of parsley asked to pay an exact change. I counted coins I hadn't learned by heart yet and thanked her for the lesson. She signed her receipt in large, confident loops. Rena. Not my witness, Rena, a different one. But the name warmed my tongue all the same. "Do you think he'll propose another time?" Julia asked while we wrapped celery like a bouquet. "He'll message at 11:58, I said, because some people try to make time a leash and discover it was a mirror. At 10:23, Leonie called. "Utilities separated?" "Yes." "Good. 2 more pins. 1. Email your HR to update emergency contact and withholdings. You do not need to explain today's plot. 2. Call your renter's insurance. Add a note about lock change and controlled access. You're not asking permission, you're telling." The file of fact, I did both. HR replied at 10:31 with the kind of corporate warmth that still counts. "Updated. Thank you." The insurance agent said, "Noted," the way you say, "bless you." Automatic and human. At 11:02, Marco sent me to the cheese man for pecorino and vocabulary. The cheese man had hands that had learned to be both delicate and sure. "You cannot rush a rind," he said, weighing a wedge. "You don't eat the rind because you were polite to it the whole time it was becoming itself." I laughed. I wrote, "Rinds, not for eating, for becoming." At 11:11, Ryan, "Can we do 2000 Friday? Traffic will be insane." The clock in my head said, "We asked for alternatives by 12. He gave one. Now, precision." I typed, "Building manager hours end at 1800. Available alternatives within policy. Friday, 1600, or Monday, 1700. Please choose by 1200 today." He replied, "Monday, 1700. I wrote back, "Confirmed. Monday, 1700 to 1800. Supervised. Entry outside that window is not permitted. The building manager will have keys." I CC'd the manager and Leon on an email thread titled, "Pickup window, Carter, confirmed. Monday, 1700 hours." Attached the calendar invite, pasted the file number at the top, like a salutation to order. At 11:28, the manager replied, "Received. We prefer no shouting." I smiled and typed, "Agreed. Elevator thanks you." At 11:37, Rena, the lawful sweater Rena, sent, "Monday is better. I teach on Fridays but will rearrange Monday." I added her to the invite. At 11:52, the carabinieri officer emailed, "Note added. New time for supervised pickup in home country. File remains open." He didn't need to, strictly speaking, but he did. A sentence that had been crooked in my chest straightened. At noon, I turned my phone face down again, not as punishment to the world, but as a reward for myself. The hour did not ask for me. I did not ask it to perform. The market's middle hours had a rhythm. Children pointing at mandarins like they were holding elections. Tourists choosing tomatoes as if they were adopting pets. Locals with lists that had the authority of old recipes. Julia taught me the cadence of quick math spoken out loud. 250 plus 180 is 430. Give me 5, 70 back. The numbers made the air feel lawful. A woman in a mustard scarf hovered at the edge of the stall and finally said, in English that wobbled but didn't fall, "You are the woman from the station?" I blinked. The officer said there was a woman who made a folder. My sister needs a folder. She tapped her temple. For the shaking. I took a receipt pad and wrote a list of things that had worked when my hands shook. Write times. Save screenshots. Bring a pen of your own. Make friends with a stapler. Drink water. Eat bread. Braid your hair. Ask the state to do its job. I tore off the sheet and handed it to her. She tucked it into her coat like a blessing. "Grazie," she said. "I will bring her bread." At 13:08, I stepped out back and called my airline again, just to confirm the PN. Our split had stuck. It had. "Window seat, right side," the agent repeated. "You'll see the coast if the clouds are polite." I laughed into my scarf and thanked her for knowing about clouds. We closed for siesta. The metal shutter came down with that roll and clack that sounds like a day bracketing itself. Julia and I carried 2 crates of apples inside, and Marco locked the side door with a key that had become loyal through use. "Break," he said. "People who never stop become fragile." We sat on upturned crates and ate bread with cheese we were meant to sell, and did not put the cost into the register because not every ledger is money. Bianca appeared with 2 small coffee cups, the kind that understand their job and do it without drama. "The lock?" she asked. "Changed," I said, invoice in the file. "The pickup?" "Monday, 17. "Good," she said. "Now the part everyone forgets." "What part?" I asked. "After you build a bridge, you walk across it," she said. Some people keep Adam in. Iring the engineering, I thought about my folder, about the laminated rectangle of my passport, about the new lock and the supervised window, and the 48 hours that had turned into a weekend and then a Monday, as if days were dominoes and I had set them up in a line. "I'll go home after the pickup," I said, hearing the verb go with relief. "But I won't go back." "Language," Bianca approved. "Soup at 19. We opened again. The late afternoon light put a hand on everything and made it honest. A man wanted to argue about the price of spinach. I didn't feel the need to be right so much as the need to be exact. "It's €2.60, I said. "You can take more or you can take less." He took more. He smiled like he'd caught me in a kindness. Julia winked. Around 5, the beekeeper stopped by and traded a jar for 2 bags of lemons. "This is how towns pay the rent to themselves," she said. "We pass usefulness around, and it grows." She looked at my hands. "You have market hands now. They don't apologize when they hand someone change." I looked. She was right. My palm had learned firmness without hardness, a held line that felt like a doorframe you could lean on while you tied your shoe. At closing, Marco slid my envelope across the counter with ceremony. "Plus a little because you advised 3 customers perfectly," he said. "And because you did not flinch when the tourist asked if biodegradable in Italian meant the same thing as in English." "Does it?" I asked. "It means we will try," he said. Evening softened the alleys. We walked past the church just as the bell took its time stepping through the hour. The sound felt less like a command and more like a reminder. Bianca's light glowed under her archway like a sentence that knows where it's going. In my room, I opened the officer's email again. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to feel what a day feels like when it has done what it was built to do. I added a printed copy to the folder because paper is a kind of anchor whose rope doesn't fray in storms. Ryan texted at 1911. Can we talk? I typed, Monday, 1700 to 1800 will be supervised. If you have logistical questions about the pickup, email the building manager with me, CCD. He replied, You don't have to be like this. I wrote back, I am like this. Nothing else came. It didn't need to. Soup at 19 was, in fact, at 19. Bianca served bowls that had steam like thought bubbles. Julia told me the story of a friend who tried to return a dress after wearing it to 3 parties, and how the shop owner, without anger, showed her the calendar and the dress and the receipt and said, We will not teach you to be this person. We laughed and then we didn't, which is to say, we let the story land where it needed to. After dishes, I took a slow walk alone along the outer wall where the town meets the drop into the valley. The sky was a navy sweater buttoned up. On the far hill, a single farmhouse lit one window. I imagined the person who turned that light on, a hand, a switch, a room becoming itself. I breathed in air the temperature of decisions. The folder under my arm was not heavy. It had become part of my posture. Back in the room, I set tomorrow's alarms. None for the morning, one for noon. Not as a panic, but as a chime. Then I turned the phone face down, tucked the passport into the inner pocket of my bag where my fingers could find it in the dark, and lay down. The building exhaled. Somewhere a door closed softly, the sound of a boarder enacted without applause. Saturday began with lists and ended with a ticket that knew my name. The middle was a braid of errands, goodbyes, and the steady thrum of a suitcase zipper. Bianca slid a plate of toast across the counter and clipped a binder clip onto my folder. For planes, she said. Folders like to feel hugged. I thought I was the one who needed that, I said. You do, she replied, but paper is honest about it. Julia arrived with a small paper bag of almonds and a transit schedule folded to the right page. You take the 1310 bus to Montepulciano, train to Rome at 14:02, Termini by evening. Sleep near the station. Sunday, airport. Monday, home. Monday, 1700, Switzerland with a stopwatch. Rena, I said, smiling. She ironed the lawful sweater, Julia said. It can deflect petty arguments. We walked to the market for my last shift. The stall lifted its shutter with a sound I knew now like a call to a small, necessary prayer. Customers came with weekend appetites and a gentleness I wanted to pack. Marco watched me tie my apron and nodded. Your hands got shorter sentences, he said. That is how hands learn law. We sold plums and patience. We wrapped celery like bouquets. The beekeeper traded a jar of dark honey for 2 heads of lettuce and a promise I would write when the plane hit the coast. Around 11, a couple from Barcelona asked for directions to a viewpoint. I drew them a map that looked so much like a child's treasure hunt I almost apologized. Then they returned 30 minutes later, breathless, grateful, insisting on buying fruit we both knew they couldn't carry far. You live here? The woman asked. For 2 days and for the rest of my life, I said, which made no sense, and all of it. At noon we closed early. You have buses, Marco said, and shook my hand the way men do when emotion would prefer a hug, but dignity chooses a firm palm. Remember, heavy things at the bottom, bright things at the top. Reasons and oranges, I said. Bianca appeared like a man, matriarch in a novel. Without warning, carrying sandwiches for the road, the kind wrapped in wax paper that you can eat with one hand while you hold the day steady with the other. I booked a room near Termini, she said, sliding a printed confirmation into my folder. Trust that the person on the other side of a long day is still you. Julia walked me to the bus stop. We stood like sisters who had met on a Tuesday and decided to be precise with the time they would be allowed to miss each other. You will text when you land, she said. I will, I said, and when the window closes on Monday. And when you make soup, she added, a person should not end a war without soup. I'm not at war, I said. I know, she said. That is why you will win. The bus came with its usual cough and grace. I climbed aboard with my folder zipped into the front of my bag where it made a square against my ribs. Julia stood on the curb and put her palm flat against the bus window. I put mine against the glass on my side. 2 hands through a century of architecture. And then the driver shifted gears and we both stepped back into our respective frames. At Stazione di Montepulciano, I bought a ticket from a machine that expected me to know how to spell my own name under pressure. The screen offered me adult, child, disability, bicycle. I chose adult and dignity and a seat near the aisle. The train arrived like a question, and I answered yes. In the car, a family of 4 negotiated snacks with the seriousness of treaties. A man in a navy coat read a paperback with the cover folded back. Across the aisle, a woman my age pressed her forehead to the glass and cried without making a sound. I pretended not to see and silently slid a clean tissue across the table between us. She took it and mouthed grazie, and the train, pleased with our civility, crossed a river as if to reward us. The rhythm of train travel is a metronome for thoughts. I checked my email and found confirmations aligned like Poe, light soldiers. Utilities separated, HR updated, insurance noted, pickup window accepted, manager CC'd, officer's file annotated. The airline had sent the reissued boarding pass for Sunday morning, and even the weather app had decided to be cooperative. Clouds, broken. Wind, reasonable. Temperature, a jacket plus a sentence. I wrote a note to myself on my phone. What this place gave me. And listed items that were neither abstract nor grand. A stapler that closes with a sound that says, enough. The way oranges bruise if you stack them in a hurry. The knowledge that a lock can be persuaded to retire. A sentence that fits into a text message and can hold a door shut. When the train slowed for a small station, an old woman looked up from her crossword and smiled at me, in that way elders sometimes do when the plot twists the way it was always going to. Termini is a mouth that never closes. It swallowed me, and my suitcase, and my competence, and spit us out into a corridor with signs in 4 languages, UAges in 5 fonts. I followed arrows the way pilgrims follow shells. Outside, the sky had become a gray silence. I checked into a hotel that understood the art of not asking questions and went upstairs to a room designed for almost sleep. The window looked out at another window across a narrow air shaft, and I could see a man ironing a shirt with devotion. I wished him a good evening under my breath, because some civility should be practiced even when it cannot be heard. I ate the sandwich Bianca packed. The wax paper sounded like paper making up its mind. I showered the travel off and set my folder on the little desk by the television. The binder clip glinted like a small lighthouse. I fell asleep earlier than was reasonable and woke at 2:16, checked the clock, laughed at myself, and slept again. Sunday morning, airport. The Leonardo Express flexed its punctuality. At Fiumicino, I moved through security with the ease of a person whose passport sat exactly where it should, in her hand. The agent looked at the photo and me and the photo again and stamped the page without sighing. I wanted to thank him for his professionalism, but settled for a good morning because nobody's good work should have to be narrated. At the gate, a small boy announced to the entire waiting area that airplanes were big birds with bones. His mother corrected him softly. His father high-fived him anyway. I put in earplugs and took them out again because the universe was being endearing. When we boarded, my seat was indeed by the window, right side. A woman in her 60s with the sort of scarf you buy in a museum store sat beside me and told me about her niece in Dublin before we had even left the ground. "I always speak to the people on planes," she said. "If the worst happens, I like to know a true fact about the person I am with. If the best happens, I have a friend for 2 hours." "The best will happen," I said. "It usually does," she agreed, and pulled out a thermos that smelled faintly of cinnamon. We took off. The coast appeared, then disappeared into cloud, then appeared again in a cameo. The plane settled into the hum I remember from childhood naps, and I fell asleep with my cheek against the cold oval, like a person learning to trust curves. I dreamed of an orange pyramid that never wobbled, not once, even when tourists pointed too closely. I woke to the cart rattling, and the question, "Coffee or tea?" and said tea, because I wanted a gentle landing. The connection was orderly. The second plane smelled like the idea of home. Bleach, coffee, overheated wool. When the wheels touched down, the entire cabin exhaled, as if the pilot had just finished a complicated sentence and deserved applause. I checked my phone and found a new email from the building manager. Monday, 1700 confirmed. Keys ready. Witness confirmed. No shouting. I wrote back, "Thank you. I will arrive today and organize the space." Customs was a line with nothing to prove. A young officer with a face full of new authority asked what I was bringing home. "A folder," I said before I could stop myself. He smiled despite the uniform. "Welcome back," he said in a voice that had practiced being official and contained a small secret kindness he probably hoped no one noticed. The taxi driver liked the radio turned low. He drove as if he were balancing a bowl of soup on the hood. We passed 3 neighborhoods that have known me, one that has rejected me, and one that will never notice me no matter what I do. When we turned onto my block, the light was the gray of a decision already made. The building's stone facade had the sturdy boredom I had always admired and never needed as badly as I needed it now. Upstairs, the new lock clicked with the sound of a fresh start, measured in metal. Inside, the apartment smelled like an absence. I set my bag down, placed the folder on the table like a center of gravity, and stood in the middle of the living room listening to the building breathe. Rena had left. A note folded neatly on the console. Keys with manager. Timer set. Monday, we are precise. A smiley face in the corner wore glasses. I opened windows. I opened the cabinet and counted bowls. I opened the closet and identified the shapes of a life in transit. His suits, my dresses, the jacket I wear when I'm afraid and want to convince my shoulders otherwise. I put a pot on for tea, and while the water considered its options, I took photos of every room the way I might photograph a friend before a brave haircut, loving, honest, ready to match what would come. I made a new list. Monday, 12 o'clock. Confirm with manager and Rena. 1400. Pack his things by category and label. 1630. Set out boxes by the door. 1645. Unlock calm. 1700. Doorbell. 1701. Clock starts. At the bottom of the page I wrote the simplest sentence I had. I will not audition for my past. The kettle clicked off, the tea steeped. The folder sat where I could touch it without reaching. Outside, somewhere on the street, a child led goal with that indeterminate city accent that is everybody's and nobody's. A neighbor's door closed with the intimacy of a period. I breathed. It felt like I had returned not just to an apartment, but to a language I had been learning in Italy and could now speak at home. Time. Receipt. Boundary. Door. Monday wore a suit of ordinary hours. I woke into it like a person choosing her outfit for a hearing. Plain. Steady. Nothing that could be mistaken for a plea. The light through the blinds made neat bars on the floor. The radiator whispered bureaucracy. The kettle came to attention at 7:10. I cleaned first. Not for him, never for him, but because order is a kindness you can give your own nervous system. I opened windows, aired the rooms, shook the rug as if it had opinions, wiped the table where the folder lived. Then I made labels on masking tape in block letters that looked like they had been taught by a good teacher. Suits, shoes, toiletries, desk cables, rarely used but loud about it. At 9 o'clock I emailed the building manager and CC'd Rena, confirming 1700 to 1800 supervised pickup. I'll stage items by the door at 1630. Please ring at 1655 to test the bell. The manager replied, Confirmed. We prefer no shouting, Rena wrote. Clipboard loaded. Stopwatch charged. I walked the apartment, treatment with a notebook the way a foreman walks a site, narrating each room into obedience. Bedroom. 2 navy suits, 1 gray, that sharkskin lie he loved. 3 shirts still in dry cleaner plastic. A tie with tiny blue ships he wore to pretend he was a person who remembered directions. Shoes. Brown Oxfords that love weather. Black dress shoes that never met a puddle. Running shoes that ran mostly on treadmills and declarations. Bathroom. Cologne bottle half full of cedar and self-exoneration. Razor. Spare toothbrush he always forgot. Office. External hard drive, tangle of cords that could knit their own sweater. A notebook with 3 pages of lists and then a doodle of a car. Bookshelf. Travel guides with unbroken spines, 2 on Italy. I opened one at random and found the train map for Tuscany, the line from Montepulciano to Rome stark as a sentence. You are here. You can go. By 11 o'clock, the boxes were half packed. I played the radio at a volume that could be mistaken for weather. News. Anchors pronounced words with the certainty of clocks. The announcer read the day's temperatures as if reading rights. At 12 o'clock, I ate soup standing up because Julia's voice in my head insisted. I added a slice of bread, buttered it without sadness, folded it like a note, and ate that too. I checked my list and crossed off small tyrants. Spare keys moved to a dish high on the shelf. Mail redirect card taped inside the door. The old doormat, sternly shaken by Rena on Friday, rolled and tucked behind the hall table, like a retired soldier. Leone called at 12:32. "This is the check-in," he said, voice like a paperclip. "You have the window. You have the witness. You have the manager. If he attempts to debate, you point to the clock. If he attempts to linger, you point to the clock. If he attempts to place an object in your hand that is not a key or a pen, you do not accept it." "What if it's an apology?" I asked, not because I believed it would be, but because some part of me needed to rehearse every prop. "Then you write, 'He apologized' in your notebook after he leaves," Leone said. "Apologies do not become legal documents when you hold them." "I will write it afterward," I said, and underlined afterward twice in my mind until it became a plank. At 1400, I lay down for 20 minutes with my forearm over my eyes because dignity is aerobic and I would need breath. The radiator clicked a metronome. My body agreed to continue. When I rose, the room had come into focus, boxes squared, labels neat, the folder on the table wearing its binder clip like a small hat. I showered and dressed in the outfit I had chosen for this errand: dark jeans, clean sweater, hair braided into the rope that had carried me across rooms in a country I hadn't planned to need. I put the passport in the inner pocket of my bag where my fingers could find it without looking. I set the officer's card beside the folder like a paperweight. I placed a water glass on the counter and filled it halfway, so even my thirst would have perimeter. At 16:20, the elevator sighed up. Rena arrived early, lawful sweater navy, clipboard under her arm. She produced a stopwatch as if sworn in and set it on the table with a click. "Procedure," she said, and smiled so kindly it broke something unnecessary in me and left the important structures standing. The building manager arrived at 1640 with a ring of keys that made a low bell when he walked. "We test the bell at 55, he said. "We open at 17. We close at 18. He looked around the room the way you look at a patient before surgery. "You staged well," he added, which is how people in logistics say, "Good job staying human." We stood a moment, three abreast, manager, witness, me, like a small choir singing the hymn of quiet rooms. Rena put the stopwatch in her palm, thumb on the button. The manager held a folder that matched mine, except his contained the law of elevators. I checked the peephole, though I never use it. The hall was empty, pristine. Even the carpet seemed to have ironed itself. At 16:55, the bell rang once, and the sound was a polite question. The manager nodded. "It rings," he said, as if this were the answer the building had been waiting for all day. At 16:59, the elevator hummed up again. At 1700, the bell rang not as a test, but as the opening of a window. Rena's thumb hit the stopwatch. The click was non-negotiable, like sunrise. I opened the door. Ryan stood there alone, hands in the pockets of a coat he loves in photos. He looked at the new lock the way a person looks at a haircut they weren't consulted about and know is better. "Hi," he said. There was no whine on his breath. There was effort on his face. "Hello," I said. "You have 59 minutes. Can we," he began. "You have 59 minutes to collect the items labeled for you," I said, and stepped aside. The manager, a half step behind me, offered the rules without adjectives. "You may take the boxes labeled for you. You may not open and drawers. If you see something you believe to be yours that is not labeled, you may ask. If a decision cannot be reached in 1 minute, the item will remain here until counsel exchanges emails." Rena raised her stopwatch so it sat at shoulder height, a small moon. "I will mark the time of every question," she said, "and the time of every answer." She clicked her pen. The sound did something to the molecules in the air. They lined up. Ryan swallowed. "Okay," he said, like a student who recognizes the test is real and that pencils and posture will matter. He moved toward the first stack. Suits. He lifted the lid, checked the contents, closed it, and nodded like a person in a warehouse. He stacked the box by the door. Shoes next, straightforward. Toiletries, one question. Is the hair trimmer mine? Rena's pen moved. Manager. Check receipt? Me. It's in your Amazon account. Ryan. Yeah, okay. Rena. 38 seconds. At 17:07, the first small snag. The blue ceramic bowl we bought at a street fair. The one we used for keys and the occasional orange. My aunt gave us cash and I picked it, he said. I liked it more, I said, because truth sometimes announces itself in the grammar of children and still deserves to be honored. Rena, question time begins, the manager. Custom is, shared gift becomes shared impression. But the bowl lives on the table where the primary resident keeps keys. He looked at me. Primary is you. Ryan's jaw flexed. Keep it, he said, attempting generosity. The stopwatch clicked. Rena, 49 seconds, she wrote. Bowl remains. At 17:12, he tried for conversation. Can we talk about us? He said lightly, lifting a box labeled desk cables and discovering that cables carry the weight of complications. He set it down. Later? This window is for objects, I said. Later is for email. He nodded, as if liking the sentence might earn him points. He took the box anyway. At 17:18, the cologne. He held it up, half full of cedar and Saturdays. Do you want this? He asked, the past perfuming the question. No, I said. We have different airs now. He put it into toiletries and taped the box shut. At 17:23, Brad texted him something that made his face lose 5 years and then regain them. He did not show me the screen. I did not ask. The manager cleared his throat and said, Phones stall elevators, which made no logical sense and exactly the right amount of moral sense. Ryan put the phone away. At 17:27, he reached for a book with my notes in the margins and stopped himself. Not mine, he said. Right. The book returned to the shelf with a small, relieved sound only I heard. At 17:31, a framed photo from 3 summers ago, a picnic where everyone looks like a brochure. Do you want this? He asked. No, I said, but I'll scan and send you a copy. I took it from his hands and set it on the scanner I'd purchased with an employee discount I didn't need to explain. The lid closed like a sure idea. The machine hummed. The copy slid out, with our posed faces softened into paper. I slipped it into a clear sleeve and handed it to him. For your folder, I said, and the word folder did something to his posture that arguing never did. At 17:36, Rena offered water. He took it, drank, set the glass down with care. Thanks, he said, to no one and everyone. This is... He didn't finish the sentence. Some words learn when to leave the room. At 17:39, the question came the way complicated things do. Sideways. Do you want the record player? He asked, meaning, do you want to keep touching something we both touched with reverence? I want you to take it, I said. It worked better in your hands. It was both true and generous, and it turned the air lighter. At 1743, he asked, almost shy, if he could take the plant we'd named without admitting we'd named it. You care for it better, I said. Take the plant. We wrapped it in a towel and he carried it like a small green truth. At 1748, the hallway filled in that subtle way hallways do when objects decide they'll be leaving soon. Boxes stacked like an argument you plan to retire. The plant by the door like a witness. Ryan stood in the center of the living room and looked at the ceiling, which had never done anything to either of us and did not need to be implicated. At 1751, he said, I'm sorry, quickly, like a trick. Rena's pen moved, the stopwatch hovered. I'll write that down after you go, I said. He nodded. You're really not going to... Not today, I said. Today is for nouns. At 1754, he held up a small bowl that used to sit on my nightstand, where I keep rings I don't wear to sleep. Yours, he said, and handed it to me with a gentleness that belonged to another version of us. Thank you, I said, and placed it on the table beside the folder. The bowl looked at home immediately, as if it had been waiting to return to a room where objects do not have to audition for their place. At 1757, the manager said, softly, but in the tone of policy, 3 minutes. Ryan gathered the last labeled box, adjusted the plant, picked up the suits. He surveyed the room and did the thing humans do in endings, searched for grace in architecture. He found nothing but walls and their kindness, which is sometimes enough. At 1759, he stood in the doorway with his hands full and looked at me like a man on a platform the second before the train moves, and all the apologies in his pockets turn back into lint. Okay, he said. Okay. Monday, 1700, Rena said, pressing the stopwatch. Complete. She wrote the time like a notary signs a wedding license. The manager opened the door wider. Elevator, he said, as if revealing a secret passage to adulthood. Ryan stepped into the hall, boxes in his arms, plant tucked out. He paused. Can I... he started, and then he didn't. Never mind. He glanced once at the new lock, nodded to it as if it were an old friend who had accepted a promotion, and moved toward the elevator. The door closed. The latitude clicked with the comfortable certainty of a machine completing a sentence. Rena stopped the clock at exactly 1800 and showed me the numbers, because numbers are a way to bring the body back into the room. 00, 5959. The manager exhaled the way buildings exhale, from somewhere deep and structural. No shouting, he observed. The elevator thanks us all. Rena handed me the stopwatch as if it were an award. For your drawer, she said. It likes to know it did a good job. Thank you, I said, to both of them and to the room. The apartment had shifted 3 degrees into a new alignment. Furniture witnessed. The table held the folder like a town holds its square. Outside, a neighbor's child laughed with the abandon only elevators and dogs can inspire. We filled in the lines on the manager's form. Time opened, time closed, witness present, items transferred, disputes deferred. Rena initialed with a flourish that would have embarrassed anyone less qualified. The manager signed with the C, airful script of a man who runs a building by writing down exactly what happened and then honoring it. When they left, the apartment held its breath for a second, then exhaled. I stood in the middle of the room and listened. No footsteps. no clatter, no echo, just the hum of a refrigerator, the thinnest thread of traffic. I poured myself water, drank half, set the glass down, and wrote in my notebook. He apologized at 17:51. I accepted the sentence, not the job. Then I added one more line, because some truths are better printed than felt. The door closed at 1800, and the story fit exactly inside the hour it was given. The morning after the window, the apartment held itself like a person sitting up straighter. The air had corners again. The table looked willing. Even the walls seemed relieved to be asked only to stand there and do their job. I began with small repairs, the kind you do partly for the apartment and mostly for your own nervous system. I oiled the squeak in the hall door, tightened the loose hinge on the kitchen cabinet, rethreaded the pull cord on the bedroom shade. The screwdriver felt good in my hand, honest, like a tool that doesn't pretend to be anything else. I wiped down surfaces with a rag that had a memory of lemon. I put fresh sheets on the bed and tucked them with the squared-off decisiveness of a hospital corner. When I was done, the room looked like it had passed inspection, which, in a way, it had. My own. On the console, Rena had left a printed summary, open 1700. Close 1800. Witness present. Manager present. Items transferred without incident. Disputes deferred to counts. She had initialed each line as if officiating a small private ceremony. In the margin in tidy script she'd written, "Stopwatch, retired, with honors." I smiled and slid the page into the folder, then slid the folder into the drawer where I keep the house papers that have decided to be loyal. The building manager emailed at 8:15. "Thank you for your precision. Elevator ran perfectly." I replied, "Grateful. Please charge any additional time to my account." He wrote back, 5 minutes, complimentary. Consider it a building's applause." I pictured the cables bowing and laughed into my tea. I took inventory of the kitchen and wrote a list in a notebook I bought the year we moved in and forgot to use. Onions, garlic, carrots, celery, canned tomatoes, pasta, beans, parsley. The list looked like a recipe for a person. I walked to the corner store, where the owner writes prices with a pencil and still trusts the arithmetic of human hands. I chose oranges 2 by 2 and stacked them carefully in my basket. Bottom layer heavy, top layer bright, just as Marco taught me. At the register, the owner slipped a sprig of parsley onto my bag, with the institutional kindness small shops keep in stock. "For color," he said. Back home, I made a pot of soup. The onions surrendered to heat. The garlic went from sharp to forgiving. The broth gathered itself into coherence. I salted like a person announcing a conclusion. While it simmered, I set up the scanner and fed it page after page. Police note, manager form, locksmith invoice, insurance confirmation, HR update, utility changes, calendar invite, Rena's stopwatch summary. Each PDF landed in a desktop folder called After, capital letters, because sometimes lowercase feels like an apology. When the last page glided through, I backed the drive up to the cloud and named it with a date. The computer made a small success sound. I let it be the applause. Leone called just after noon. "How did the window go?" he asked. "Neat," I said. 59 minutes, 59 seconds. Witness and manager present, no shouting. "Excellent," he said. 2 last pins for now. 1. Send a short, non-accusatory note to his counsel if he has one. If not, to Ryan directly. stating that future handoffs must be scheduled in writing with witnesses. 2. Put your folder away, not because you won't need it, because you will not live leaning against it. I drafted the note. Future exchanges, if any, by written request, with 2 proposed times, witnessed, supervised, 1-hour window, no drop-ins, file number attached. I CC'd the building manager and Leone, blind copied myself, hit send, and felt the way a floor feels when an extra joist is added quietly under it. A text from Julia arrived a moment later. Video? I tapped the link and her face filled the screen. Cheeks pink from morning air, hair tucked under a cap, the market stall behind her alive with oranges and small talk. Show me your kitchen, she said. I panned. She nodded at the soup. Good. Bowls? I held one up. Simple, white, the kind you can eat anything from. Good, she said. Eat twice. Once for hunger, once for thanks. Bianca appeared in the frame, half her face, then the rest like a cameo. You look taller, she announced. I'm the same height, I said. Not in your posture, she corrected, and Julia laughed, low and pleased. Also, Bianca added, I mailed something to your building manager. A magnet. He has a metal cabinet. It will remind him to like you. You can do that? I asked. Women with mops can do anything, she said, and blew a kiss in the direction of my camera, as if kisses were tickets. After we hung up, I ate. The soup was a thesis that had spent a long, uncontroversial time becoming right. I carried a bowl to the window and stood where the apartment can see the street but not be seen. The city's sound a soft, civic hum. When the bowl was empty, I filled it again. Hunger first, then thanks. The afternoon became a list of small, faithful acts. I wrote thank you notes in actual ink, the kind that comes off on your fingers if you don't respect the drying time. One to the officer at Stazione di Montepulciano, short, formal, sincere. One to Bianca, effusive, messy, with a photograph of the folder clipped to the top, because she loves proof. One to Marco, 2 lines about oranges, and the way a day can feel held by hands doing work. One to Julia, long, because some people don't read long letters, but Julia does, and because writing to her felt like stacking a pyramid that wouldn't wobble. I wrapped a small package for Rena, a stopwatch, new, not the one she used here. A thank you card with a drawing of an elevator. A jar of dark honey from the shop a few blocks over, labeled in my own neat hand, for lawful energy. I left it with the doorman, who treats packages like house pets and knows everyone's floor by the sound of their keys. Next, I opened the closet and faced the empty oblong where his suits had hung. The hangers looked startled, and I slid them together and moved them to the far end. On the shelf above, where his shoeboxes had performed their stacked impersonation of stability, I set a row of labeled bins, winter hats, umbrellas, tools, paper. I taped a printed list inside the door. It was not just for me. It was a memo to the future that said, "This home knows itself." With a pen on the inside of the front door, just above the eye level of doubt, I taped one sheet of paper, a timeline. Pienza. Ryan takes keys, 1957. Message sent, 2013. Folder made, 8:02 next day. Station, 0907, form opened. Noon, stamp. Villa visit, 2103. Lock change, 14000. Window, 17:000 to 18:000. Door closes, 18:000. Not to glorify, to codify. If my future self ever stands at the door feeling story tug at her sleeve, she can glance left and remember, you wrote this down. I took a walk to the park. Children in winter coats chased a soccer ball with the kind of commitment that makes rules unnecessary. A man fed pigeons the way philosophers feed syllogisms, steadily, as if truth is only a matter of patience. A jogger in neon carried her own small weather system. I sat on a bench and watched the world refuse to be dramatic. It was a relief. Back home, I opened the travel guides to Italy we never used and peeled the price tags off because they'd lasted too long. I put them into a donation box with other objects that had failed to become necessary. On the inside cover of one, I found my handwriting. When you learn how to leave, you learn how to stay. I didn't remember writing it. Perhaps I had borrowed it from a future self. At 5, a friend stopped by with a plant that did not require constant forgiveness. It thrives on neglect, she said cheerfully, and set it on the sill. Every house needs one. We drank tea and didn't gossip. Instead, we did that thing women do that never gets enough credit. We exchanged logistics. Which locksmith? How many emails? What words did you find that sized the day just R? 8? I read her the sentences I'd sent, the ones Julia had helped subtract adjectives from. She nodded like a supervisor checking off a completed shift. Yes, she said. Those are sentences that escort women through doors. After she left, I set out 2 more bowls. One for keys, back where the blue ceramic had been. One small one on the nightstand, the ring bowl that Ryan handed me at 1754. The objects felt suited to their jobs immediately, as if they had been hired properly this time. At 7, I dialed the station in Montepulciano to thank the officer. He wasn't on duty. The colleague who answered took my name, said he would pass it along, and then, because kindness shows up in unexpected uniforms, asked if I was La Signora col fascicolo marrone, the woman with the brown folder. Si, I said, surprised at the tug in my chest, and we both laughed as if we had closed a light door between polite strangers and a shared story. Bene, he said. Allora, buona serata. I ate the last. Bowl of soup, standing up, the way Julia taught me, watching steam lift in a slow, confident ribbon. I took the saint card Bianca had given me from my wallet and stuck it to the fridge with a magnet. The saint's face looked tired, which I took as an omen. Someone who's worked a long day understands you better than someone who glows all the time. Finally, and this felt important not for legality but for living, I put the folder away. Not in the drawer by the door, not on the table, not on the desk. In the file cabinet, under A, for after, between apartment lease and attic tax. I closed the drawer, and the little click sounded like a good night said by someone with authority and love. I brushed my teeth and stood at the bathroom sink looking at my face like an auditor. It looked like someone who had moved heavy things to the bottom and bright things on top, and found that the stack stayed. I turned off the light and walked through the apartment in the dark, touching the backs of chairs, edge of the table, the cool fridge, the warm radiator with my fingertips, the way you touch a sleeping child's shoulder, checking, not needing to fix. In bed, I opened my notebook and wrote one short entry, the shortest of the week. Home. No debate. Then I closed the book and let the room conduct the symphony. Small buildings play when they believe in their own foundations. The whisper of pipes. The sigh of someone 2 floors down closing a wardrobe. The city breathing through the slats. Tuesday taught me what victory actually sounds like in a home. A kettle talking to itself. The elevator deciding to be punctual. The mail slot whispering a single envelope into the hall. No trumpets, no swelling strings, just the domestic percussion of a life resuming its meter. I woke without rehearsal in my chest. The light on the floor made its quiet bars, and the radiator, dependable as a clerk, signed in. I braided my hair, not because I needed armor, but because I like the way the braid keeps time with my spine. I boiled water, poured tea, and opened the notebook whose last entry had been 2 words. Home. No debate. On the hall table, the folder slept in the drawer labeled After. I didn't take it out. I rested my palm on the wood above it the way you pat a dog that doesn't require your voice to know it's loved. Then I turned to the day. Work first. Not at the market. My flight had put an ocean between me and oranges, but the market had trained my hands. I answered emails with senator tenses that could stand without leaning on adjectives. I wrote 3 memos for a project that had grown lopsided while I was away, trimming its sentimental hedges until the path showed. When someone on the thread began to confuse volume with contribution, I replied with a timeline and a list. The thread calmed, like a dog reminded of its name. At 11, the building manager knocked twice, the way professionals do when their knuckles are trained not to startle. He handed me a padded envelope and a smile that contained actual relief. From a woman named Bianca, he said, a magnet. Inside, a refrigerator magnet shaped like a tiny blue door with a silver knob. Beneath it, in her handwriting, for doors that remember who they belong to. I laughed and stuck it to the fridge beside the Saint card. The Saint looked pleased to have company. Mail brought 2 bills, 1 postcard, and a letter from HR confirming the emergency contact update. The postcard was from Julia, already moving at the speed of care. A picture of the Pienza Piazza with a smear of late sun on stone. On the back she'd written, "Today the beekeeper brought honey that tastes like time and stubbornness." I told her about your stopwatch. She says to say brava. Also, Marco stacked the oranges too high because he misses your steady. We yelled at him lovingly. She had included a drawing of a pyramid that did not wobble. I set the postcard upright against the tiny blue door. The kitchen looked like a bulletin board for competence. At noon, I walked to the corner store to return a glass bottle and buy parsley because the apartment wanted green. The owner, who has never asked me how I am and somehow always knows, threw an extra lemon into the bag with the gravity of a judge awarding damages. For brightness, he said. On the way back, a neighbor I only nod to slowed enough for words. Quiet week, she said, eyes flicking toward the elevator as if remarking on weather. I nodded. We prefer it, I said, and sees. He smiled the smile of 2 people who share a building and a philosophy. Back home, I made herb butter and froze it in coins because future dinners deserve little gifts from past afternoons. I labeled the bag with the date and the word coins because names steady things. Then, because I could, I sat on the floor with 3 boxes labeled donate and made decisions at a rate that would impress a mayor. Keep, give, recycle. Keep, give. Each item passed through my hands like testimony. I didn't listen longer than necessary. At 2, I called my father, not for permission, for the opposite. He picked up on the third ring with the sound of a chair scooting back. "Kiddo," he said, and I was briefly 6, and also 32, and also a woman who had stood in a police station in a braid and told the state exactly what happened. "I'm okay," I said. "I handled it." "I figured," he said, and I heard pride walk into the room and sit down. "You sounded like a foreman in your texts." We talked about ox and windows and how elevators can be metaphors if you let them. He told me about a neighbor kid who's rebuilding a motorcycle from the frame up. "Says he wants to hear the engine tell the truth," Dad said, amused. We didn't talk about Ryan because we didn't have to. My verbs did the work. Before we hung up, my father said, "Write it down for someone who needs to see the steps." You have a gift for steps. It felt like being handed a wrench with my name on it. So I wrote. Not the story with all its pretty weather, that would come later, or not, but the boring facts, as a map another person could put their feet on. I titled it, "The 48-Hour Method for People Who Need a Door to Close," and listed 10 steps in order, each a sentence that would not tremble in a courthouse or a kitchen. I taped a copy inside the kitchen cabinet door behind the spices where recipes live, so future me could reach for cumin and remember without drama how she did this once and could again if she ever. I had to. Then I exported it to a PDF and named it with date and the word bridge. At 3, I went downstairs to meet Rena in the lobby. She wore civilian clothes now, no lawful sweater, though her posture made every cardigan lawful. I handed her the little package, a new stopwatch, the elevator card, the honey. She laughed at the drawing of the elevator, the way people laugh when art finds them competent. "You're a good neighbor," she said. "You're a precise one," I replied. In the evening, I cooked the soup again, this time for company. 2 friends came, one with her laptop because she had financial forms I could help demystify, one with a story about a preschool director who confuses chaos with charisma. We ate standing up, then sitting down, then standing up again because friendship has the right to be informal. I showed them the blue door magnet. They told me I should sell them. I told them Bianca already had a line around the block somewhere. We made a list of boring facts we love, and I wrote them on the whiteboard by the fridge where other apartments put wine lists. The bus comes at 21:30. The locksmith's fish-shaped tool is called a follower. The mail redirect number is ML3198. Vivaldi on hold teaches patience only if you choose to be taught. 2 cups of stock need 1 teaspoon of salt unless the day recommends a pinch more. We stuck the list under the saint. The saint approved. Around 9, after the soup and the stories and the extra bowls had been put away in their rightful places, I sat at the table with my laptop and wrote one more thing. A letter to the person I had been on the piazza when the car turned the corner and chose to be a joke. I didn't write it as a scolding. I wrote it as a witness. "You had 8% battery and €50, I typed, and you still chose a plan over a performance. You will do this again in ways that do not involve passports or policemen. You will inventory your own hours and move heavy things to the bottom and bright things to the top." I saved it under the file name HELD. The apartment had its night noises lined up. The elevator's lullaby hum. The neighbor's quiet television, shaped like a rectangle of blue under their door. The city, moving politely on the other side of my windows. I turned off the lights, left the tiny blue door glowing in the fridge's reflection, and stood in the dark a moment, the way you pause after stapling pages together, to feel the binding hold. In bed, I thought about Pienza, about the woman in the mustard scarf whose sister needed a folder. About the beekeeper who tasted time in stubbornness. About the officer who drew a small square on the paper and called it the law. I thought about Bianca's mop and pen, Julia's steady hands, Marco's pyramids, Rena's stopwatch, Leone's rails, the building manager's affection for elevators that behave. I thought about how none of them had tried to be heroes, and all of them were. I fell asleep with the plainest word in my mouth. A word I had carried all week like a coin, warm from my palm. Enough. In the morning I would go to work, and the day would be ordinary in the way that saves people, meetings that end on time, emails that use the subject line properly, grocery runs where the apples don't bruise because you don't hurry what doesn't need hurrying. I would come home and make eggs with herb butter coins and eat them over the sink, and I would not feel lonely because the room and I had promised to keep each other company. And later, maybe much later, I would tell the whole story, the way stories want to be told, with weather and smells and bells, and the way a town can carry you 3 inches off the ground while it hands you your own feet back. I would not make myself the hero. I would make the folder the hero, and the clock the chorus, and the door the last, clean line. For now I turned on my side, felt the cool of the sheet against my shin, listened for the click I knew would come, the building's nightly affirmation. And when it arrived, small and sufficient, I said, "Good," into the dark, and sleep took the rest of the sentence and filed it where it belonged. 1 year after, I went back to Pienza in late autumn, when the olives turned the color of ink and the hills looked written on. The bus sighed into the square as if it remembered me. Julia was there, with a paper cone of roasted chestnuts, fingers warm, grin the same. "You kept the spare key?" she asked. "In the drawer with the receipts," I said. We walked the lanes we had walked before. Every arch carried a small echo. The morning my phone died like a brave animal. The noon the stamp hit paper and a season ended. The evening I learned to stack reasons heavy at the bottom, bright on top. At the stall, Marco had built a pyramid of oranges that didn't wobble. "For your report," he joked, handing me one. The peel opened the way good doors open, cleanly, with purpose. We stopped at the station. The young officer wasn't at the desk, but his colleague recognized the story before the name. "La signora col fascicolo marrone," he said, "the woman with the brown folder," and we laughed like people who have seen bureaucracy behave and are a little in love with it when it does. Bianca's lamp still made a pool of gold beneath the arch. In her kitchen, the pot murmured, and she scolded me for not writing sooner while ladling soup into bowls that knew exactly how to hold a day. I left a note on her fridge under the Saint magnet, next to a tiny blue door she'd mailed me months ago, now returned as a pair, for doors that remember who they belong to. On hotel stationery, I wrote one sentence and tucked it under the magnet's edge. Power is a receipt you keep, not a favor you owe. That night I slept in the same small room that first taught my spine to stand without shouting. The window breathed a square of cold into the dark. I thought of the stopwatch on Rena's clipboard, the locksmith's fish-shaped tool, Leone's rails, the building manager's love of elevators that don't argue, the beekeeper's time-dark honey, the market's exact change, the way a folder can be a bridge if you write what H happened and then walk across. In the morning, bells stepped through the hour. I caught the bus as it rounded the corner, and Pienza kept the version of me who would always live there. The woman with the braid in the folder, the calm yes to boring facts, the quiet no to doors that don't deserve her key. If this story steadied you, I'd love to hear from you. What's your 48th hour? The boundary you set, the small receipt that changed your life. Drop your thoughts in the comments so someone else can find their bridge. And if you want more true, slow burn storytelling like this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Your voice and that one click tell the algorithm that calm, honest stories matter.